Hi, I'm Sin from Art Science Museum. A very good afternoon to all of you. For the last 28 years, Dutch sculptor Theo Jansen has been breathing life into a series of wind-powered creatures, which he calls Strandbeests. These astonishing creatures are the true embodiment of art, science, engineering, and performance. And today's Conversations program is held in celebration of the exhibition opening of Windwalkers, Theo Jansen's Strandbeests. It's the first Southeast Asian exhibition of these extraordinary creations here at Art Science Museum. We're incredibly privileged to have Theo Jansen speaking this afternoon, as you know, and he's joined by a panel of speakers who will lend a cross-disciplinary dimension to the panel discussion later. So they are Michael Friedman, horologist and historian at Audemars Piguet, sponsor of the exhibition. We also have Singapore-based artist Isabelle Desjeux, who has a really curious installation that sits alongside Theo's works up in the exhibition space. And finally, we have Sabrina Smith. She's the Director of Community Engagement at Earth Observatory of Singapore. Please join me in welcoming Sabrina Smith, chair of today's Conversations program, to the stage.
Thank you very much. I'm thrilled to be here. Welcome to all of you who are joining us. This is going to be a really wonderful afternoon. So I first learned of Theo Jansen and his Strandbeests back in 2015, which is not very long ago, and I sort of feel late to the party as I learn more about you. But I was still working back in San Francisco at a museum called the Exploratorium, and our art curator was thrilled to announce that she was bringing the Strandbeests to the Exploratorium for a debut in the summer of 2016. And lots of excitement went around that because it's such a perfect fit for a museum like that, as it is here. So, you know, for me, when I look at these creatures, and I first saw them when Theo brought them to the museum in San Francisco to test them out in the spaces that we had around, which was very windy area there. You know, to me, I see them as these dreamy, flowy creatures that just seem to fly along effortlessly across the sand, across the street, across any space. But then when you look deeper into the guts of them, you know, the complexity and the mechanics and engineering that's behind what they do and how they work and inside how they work, it's really staggering and, you know, completely complex and hard for me to grasp. So, you know, for decades, as I said, Theo's been building these Strandbeests and letting them walk the beaches of the Dutch coast, as well as anywhere else, as you've seen, I'm sure many of you online with his fabulous videos that are just everywhere. He's been in museums throughout the world and has a fabulous TED Talk that I highly recommend if you haven't seen it yet. But with that said, it's my great delight to invite you to the stage. Thank you.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming to this talk, and I cannot tell you how honored and happy I am to show my work in this wonderful museum, and I think that the people have done a great job showing my work here. All the design and all the, well, every time is different that you show your work, and every time is in fact the voice of the curator who tells the story. And I must say, in this case, the story was told quite well. So first, I would like to tell you about my first experiences with this kind of tube. We use this in Holland for cables in houses, so electricity cables. And so it's very common, and it's on the street, and it's very cheap as well. So it started all with the lack of money, you could say. And while working with the tubes, I got really addicted to them. And so I'm motivated more, not of the lack of money, but somehow it is the way that these tubes, they force me to make beautiful things. So it's not, so every time I wake up in the morning with a wonderful idea, I go to my studio and try to realize that idea, and always these tubes, they protest. They want something else. And so they push me in another way. So the next day I make up with a new ingenious idea, and then that is based on the experience of these tubes on the day before. So you could say that the path which I'm walking is not a straight path from A to B. It's capricious and unpredictable. I don't know where I'm going. And in fact, when the animal is finished, I'm surprised myself how beautiful these animals became. And I think it's just because of the tubes. They advised me all the time. While playing with the tubes, they start talking to you, and they advise me all the time, and that's how it works. So people who call this intelligent design, they overestimate my intelligence in the first place. And the other thing is that it's, in my opinion, it's real evolution. It's something which you could see my ideas as a sort of mutants, and these mutants, some work, most of them don't work, by the way, and then the tube is leading me. So at this moment, I would like to show you how the tube came into my life. I was 11 years old, and this tube in Holland is on the street. And there's an open window over there. And it always went in. So you can write something on that little letter and shoot it in your girlfriend's room. So that's how it all started. Now I would like to become serious and to explain about the leg system of the beasts. So that's why I brought this model here. You can also find this in the exhibition. So in all the Strandbeests, they have a sort of backbone. And the backbone makes a circular movement like this. And this circular movement is transformed into a walking movement written here by the pencil. And as you can see, as soon as the pencil is on the ground, it draws more or less a straight line. And that means that the animal, it stays on the same level while walking. That's unusual because normally when animals walk, they toss up and down like we do. And the Strandbeests, they walk in a way that they stay on the same level. And that's because of the shape of this curve written by the pencil with the flat bottom. But the shape of this curve is very much depending on the length of the tubes between the backbone and the pencil. If you have another proportion of length, you get a totally different curve. Now, when I started this, I didn't know which proportion of length I needed to get this curve. That's why I wrote a computer program which could generate this curve with a given proportion of length. But still, there are so many possibilities. If you would let pass all the possibilities, the computer would be on for 100,000 years. And that's why I needed to use the principle of evolution. And the principles of evolution don't bring you to the most optimal results, but you come there fast. And that works in a way that we're born 1,500 legs like this in the computer. And they all have different lengths of tubes. So you get 1,500 different kind of curves. And none of these curves is this curve. The chance is very, very small. But there are some of these 1500 curves which are a bit similar, like this one. They have a slightly flat bottom, you could say. And those are selected by the computer, and those are also the legs which may stay alive. All the other legs, they die. And the living legs, the selection, gets the privilege to multiply. And that means that the tubes, they are copied and reassembled to 1500 new combinations, which in fact are the children of the selection. Now this process of selection and reproduction went on for months, day and night, and in the end there were coming 13 numbers out of the computer, which were the lengths of the tubes which I needed, and I built the first Strandbeest, which was really able to walk, and indeed the Strandbeest stayed on the same level like you have seen in the videos. Now this code, these 13 numbers, you could see as the DNA code of the Strandbeest. And I published this DNA code on my website a long time ago already, and since then hundreds and maybe thousands of students use this code to make their own Strandbeests. And these Strandbeests, these student Strandbeests, is a special kind of Strandbeest. They don't survive very well on beaches, but they survive on bookshelves in student rooms. And they appear in all corners of the world, and all these students, they think they're having a good time, but the fact is that they're used for the reproduction of the Strandbeests. So they're infected with the Strandbeest disease, and from that moment, they are not able to do anything else but making Strandbeests. So they're abused students, you could say. Now I'd like to tell you something about the nervous system of the beasts. Let me see. I need some assistance. Yes, you look like a perfect assistant. Well, people keep on saying, you just have to stick your hand up like this. Yep, take it. Thank you. You have to take this one. Hey. Thank you so much. So, at the end of this tube, there's a small O-ring. And that fits exactly in another tube. And in fact, what you have here is a bicycle pump. So if you can pump air with this. Now these pumps are connected to you may have seen the wings moving in the video. They go up and down, and with the wind, it pumps air. And it pumps air in soda bottles to high pressure. And I call these soda bottles the wind stomach, because the energy from the wind is pressed into the bottles, you could say. Now, the other way around, if you connect the pressed bottle with a pump like this jumps out. And then you have what I call a muscle. A muscle is nothing but an object which becomes longer or shorter on command. So, in this case, the object becomes longer, our muscles become shorter, and the command is given here by a valve which opens. And if the valve opens, this jumps out. And so the signal, the triggering of the muscle is given by a valve which opens the air, the pressed air, to go into this. Now, you could see the valve as a sort of nerve cell. I have a nerve cell here. Well, it was here. Here's a nerve cell. You can find them in many beasts. And in fact, the nerve cell is nothing but a valve. I will show you. So, if I blow air in here, The air goes in here and comes out of here. So this is a connection. But if I push in this piston here, it's blocked. So this is nothing but a valve. Open, close. Now, this valve is controlled by a small piston. So I will show you. So if I blow air in here, the valve closes and no air comes out of here. So you could say that the output is opposite from the input. And I see everybody nodding now, but because as soon as you use words like output and input, well, people get a little bit allergic for these words. So I want to be very clear to you, and nobody leaves this classroom before everybody knows how it works. So if you see this as a person, and this is the ear, and this is the mouth says the opposite from what it hears. So that's why I call this a liar. It says the opposite from what it hears. If it hears there's air, the mouth says, no, there's no air. So it's a liar. Now we're going to do a small experiment here. Yeah, this is Michael, my friend, we will see on stage later. And I know he is a good liar. So I say, so Michael, you are a liar. And let's say that Anna is a liar. She cannot lie, but for today she can play lying. I am a liar. So if I say to you, yes, you hear yes, what would you say to Anna?
No. Yes.
Oh, you're such a perfect liar. So I hear yes now and I say no. And this conversation of three liars, I changed my opinion. And that's what you have always with an uneven number of liars. You keep changing your opinion. With two liars, you keep saying the same thing, but with three liars, you have a so-called dynamic system. Okay. Everybody still there? And I have three liars here. Here they are. So, Michael, this is you. Anna, this is you. And this is me, and our mouth and ears are connected. Let's see what the liars have to say to each other. Though they're saying yes and no, just like we did. So, and as you know, you can see a yes as a 1 and a no as a 0. So with these liars, you can switch zeros and ones, just like in a computer. So what you see here, ladies and gentlemen, is the beginning of the brain of the Strandbeests. And the brains can make decisions based on the outer information given by the senses. Now, the Strandbeests don't have ears and they don't have eyes. And so thinking of senses, so they are blind and deaf. So it's harder for them to navigate on the beach. So imagine you're on the beach. The only way to navigate a little bit is by feeling the hardness of the sand. Because near the sea, the sand is a little bit harder. So that's why the Strandbeests have sand feelers. There are two pins on the end of a stick which go beat on the ground, and in the soft sand nothing happens, but on the hard sand the pins are pushed up and opens a little valve, and then the animal knows it's on hard sand, and near the sea it should be careful then. Also, the outer senses can be the water feeler, and I have a water feeler here. This is the water feeler. So this tube is vital for surviving on the beach. It goes over the ground about this height, and it sucks in air all the time. And as soon as it arrives into the sea, it swallows the water and feels the resistance of the water. And then there should happen something. The animals should use its ski poles to pull the beast out of the sea. So that's why they use the ski poles to walk in cases of emergency, when the wind is gone and they have to run out of the water. Normally the strandbeests, they walk by just being pushed directly by the wind, but sometimes they have to walk in emergency cases, and that's when they felt the water of the sea, because they drown very easily. As soon as they're longer than a few minutes in the rolling surf, the feet are sucked into the sand and they cannot move anymore. So they should really do something. Now we don't have a strandbeest here, but we can have an indicator of feeling the sand, feeling the water, and that's the lyre. So I will connect the lyres with the water feeler. It's too many for my hands. Michael, would you be so kind to come on stage and hold the zip tie, which is on top there? That's not a zip tie. That's the zip tie. Yeah, thank you. And so I connect the lyres with the water feeler here. So if I put this in water, is there some water? Yeah, there's some water here. It's I was supposed to sit over there, so this is my own water, right? And so this is the sea. So as soon as I put this into the water, you should hear the lyres rattling. But first I have to loosen some nerve cells here. What? It has been a long time, I guess. Michael, my God. Yeah. Okay, I have to loosen this one a bit. You okay still?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it's so dangerous. It's good that you have glasses, because sometimes these bottles explode, you know?
I know.
So let's see. I'm going to open a valve now, and it's going to move in your hands. Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Let me see where I open the valve. It's over here. I found it. Come on. I don't know, maybe there should be enough pressure in there. Oh yes, there it goes. Did you do that? It's a little bit slow, I would say. I think a little bit of patience. I have some. Well, I don't know what went wrong here. I have to. It seems that there is not enough pressure in the bottles. We're going to do that later, maybe. So I put it on the back. Yes, sometimes things don't work, you see. I'm sorry about that. Cheers. I would like to tell you about my people always ask me, what is the most favorite animal you have? And it's always the animal which I'm working on right now. And so last week I was on the beach and I was working with the new caterpillar. I would like to show a movie about that. Is that possible, I think? You know how to find it? The Uminami, yeah, that's the one. So this was last week. Yeah, we can. So this is a new kind of animal, which is just quite recent. This was last week, but since about 3 years, I'm working on these caterpillars. The first caterpillar 3 years ago, the first one, it had a very complicated wire, or what do you call it, a line from, it had about 70 lines from the front to the back, and it didn't move at all. That's something which is always the case. I have an idea and then it doesn't move at all. And then during the time I tried again and again, and then I started cutting one of these lines and it gained more freedom in there. And in the end it had only 4 lines. And the one you see here in the exhibition has only 4 lines. And you may have seen it moving already because every now and then the people are showing how to move it, and you may move it yourself as well. And then it seems to be a very simple way of moving, much more simple than the leg system which I just explained to you. And another thing is that it doesn't have hinging joints anymore. So in the other animals, the sand in the joint was always a problem because the joints get worn out and you have to lubricate it. Sometimes I put some oil in there or soap and to make it walk more smoothly. The caterpillars don't need that because it are segments which make a small angle and they don't need lubrication. So there can be a sandstorm and still they would stand up and walk. The only thing is they walk with the wind. So in the future, if I have a future imagination about the caterpillars, I see them as a sort of migration animals. So the Dutch coast is very long, well, not comparing to countries like Chile or, so it's, the longest part is, I think, is 100 kilometers. And you imagine that there's a caterpillar standing on the southwest side and the wind is southwest, then they would walk all the way up to the northern part. And there it goes to the soft sand and with a sort of ski poles as well. So it will have a driving system, which is also based on bottles and pressed air. And there it waits until the wind has turned 180 degrees, which might take a few weeks, but these animals are incredibly patient. And so after a few weeks, the wind is northeast, and they feel that the wind is northeast, and it tells it to the brain that the wind is northeast, and the brain will activate muscles to go to the hard sand again, and then with their ski poles, and then they run back to the beginning. So I see them as migration animals between those two places. So I guess on the days that the wind is changing and going, that it can predict to see the migration of them, and then herds of these animals walk from the north to the south and back. So that's my dream. And I hope to realize this dream before I leave the planet, and I planned to leave the planet in about 30 years from now. And so I have still 30 years to realize this plan. This might provoke some questions maybe, because it's, well, we must see how far this goes, okay? Are there any questions maybe? Or is it planned for later?
It is planned for later, but...
Oh, okay. Yes?
How fast are those animals going?
Well, the classical animals, they don't go so fast. So I still can just beat them by running after them. But the caterpillars, I noticed, they are really fast. And so last week I had problems to keep up with them. And the movie was taken with the car driving next to them. So I would say that the caterpillars could go, well, they could reach 25 kilometers an hour. We didn't try it yet, but I think in a few months they are able to do that. Other questions maybe? Yes? On water, yes. Well, the classical beasts, they should be afraid of water because they are too sensitive for water and they would drown too easy. But maybe the caterpillars, if you put the bottles on the bottom of them, then they could float more or less on the bottles and go this way. So they might also be the first generation of strandbeests which will love water. And so they can really, they don't have to be afraid of it, as long as they have air enough in their wind stomach and that they can walk out of the water or just go for a swim of a few days and land somewhere else at the coast again to their, so like amphibies, how do you call it? Animals which live in the water and on the land, something like that. Maybe that might be a future for them. Okay, yes, you had a question?
What's your reason for the scale? Because
I'm a little bit deaf, so I go to you. Yeah.
I understand that your beasts are always very big.
Yes.
But is there a reason for that scale? Like, can't you make it like smaller and
Yeah.
more compact?
Yeah.
Like, you know, almost like a pet kind of thing.
Yes. So the question is, the size of the animals, is that important? Well, it is somehow, because the storms are quite aggressive. So the wind is always there, and small animals are being blown away quite easy. So what happens is that these walking units of 12 legs, like the orders you have seen here, they group together and they make one big animal, you could say. So if you could see a big animal as a group of animals, a herd of animals, which hold each other to prevent them from being blown away. Now, the other thing is, to handle a big beast on the beach is a bit hard for me on my own to do. So that makes them shrink again a little bit, because I don't want to call every time a group of people to help me to get the beast back. So they have a size now which is a little bit in between, and which is about 5-6 meters, which is still able to handle. Now the caterpillars are quite small, they are 5 meters and they're quite low, so they're very easy for me to handle, and they don't blow away that easy because they have more grip on the sand, I would say. Yes? Yes?
Thank you. And we'll invite Michael and Isabelle to join Theo on the stage. Let me just introduce, Michael is a horological expert. And some of you might say, now what is that? It's the study of time measurement. So just, grapple with that for a few minutes. The study of time measurement. He and Theo worked together, sharing some similarities of self-moving objects back in 2014 during a Strandbeests exposition at Art Basel in Miami, Florida. He is also an appraiser, a curator, and a lecturer, and knows a lot about clocks and watches and how they work. Isabelle Desjeux, who is here, a local, has been living here for the past 20 years, is an artist and scientist, and melding both disciplines to create experiences through video, installations, and lectures. And her work in experimental art and science practice has been commissioned by the museum, and if you've been to the exhibition, you've already seen her installation downstairs, downstairs. But if you haven't, you will when you go look at the exhibition. So please welcome them all to the stage. So let's get started. We have a panel discussion with some wonderful questions and ideas and some fun treats here for you today. So let's start right now with Theo. Take things back to when you first started in 1986. You came across Richard Dawkins' book, The Blind Watchmaker. And why the evidence of evolution reveals a universe without any design. How did that book become such a starting point for you and your Strandbeests?
Yeah, well, Richard Dawkins is a brilliant storyteller. Mm-hmm. So he took me into his world, and a part of the book is about computer simulations about evolution. And the examples which he gave was that how things could change in shape in a few generations. And so that inspired me to build my own evolution program. These were little worms which live on the computer screen. So if they would go off on the top, they would come up on the bottom, and if they go on the right, they come back at the left. So this was their universe, you could say. And in this universe, the worms were creeping over, but as soon as they touch another worm in the flanks, then it would kill that worm. So after a while, the screen had less worms because a lot of the worms died. And then comes the moment, then becomes spring, and then the worms start to multiply. Now, before I tell something about the multiplying, is that the worm was quite simple. It had 4 segments, and each segment could either be straight or curved, one way or curved the other way. And so with curved and straight pieces and 4 pieces, you can make all kind of combinations. So imagine that there's a mutant which has a curled tail. It's a little bit shorter and has a little bit less chance to be stuck by the other ones. So the result was that when this process went on from selection and multiplying, then the next day all the worms were crawled up and very small. So that was in fact an intelligent action from a very simple genetic system. So, and I sent a letter to Richard Dawkins with this program, and I think it was his secretary said something like a standard from, this is very nice. So this was my contact with Richard Dawkins personally.
No fast friendship developed after that.
Yeah, that's right. And I still look forward to the moment that I can personally meet him. Yeah.
Good. Michael, this one is for you. There is a special place that watches hold in the present day. And it's connected to the fact that watchmaking is one of the most interdisciplinary fields in existence, deeply rooted in various spheres within the arts and science. You know this more than any of us here. Could you elaborate on the similarities between your work in watchmaking and Theo's creations?
Sure, it actually connects back to Richard Dawkins, who was a big influence on me as well, around the same time period, reading the same books, The Blind Watchmaker and The Selfish Gene, which I think followed The Blind Watchmaker, where he introduced the idea of memes, which of course now is a very common term, been a little altered since Dawkins' initial use of the term, but that's the genesis of that word, was Richard Dawkins. So keep in mind that biological evolution is part of the broader story of time measurement. It's not traditionally part of horology, but as somebody interested and invested in the entire history of time measurement, deep time, which is what biological evolution starts to touch upon, that was a subject that actually interested me prior to my introduction to horology, or the more, let's say, contemporary systems of time measurement. And by contemporary, I'm talking the last 4,000 years, as opposed to millions of years. Yeah. So we started from a very similar standpoint in terms of an influence source. And the fact that Dawkins called that book The Blind Watchmaker is not accidental. He himself was establishing this loose metaphor, which is exactly what it is, a loose metaphor. But when you jump into systems of time measurement, and to go to your question of sort of this intermingling between art, science, and engineering and interdisciplinary studies, the history of time measurement is fascinating. And just to give it a quick summary, every single object of time measurement, from cross-historical bounds, cross-culturally, it's been one of the only objects of science and industry that's always been richly decorated. From the ancient obelisks of Egypt, to the works of the Islamic Golden Age, to 11th century China, to the birth of mechanical clocks and watches in the West, all the way through this history, even up to the present day. Those who visit CERN and look at the Hadron Collider and its coordination with the atomic clock, there's elements of absolute beauty in how these objects are created. And this is where the philosophical notions and the cultural notions and the scientific notions come together, because unlike other objects of industry, objects of time measurement mean something to us. They represent the passage of time itself. This is something that all human beings share. We all share water, the need for food, the need for shelter, but we all are ultimately the products of time and time measurement. So this is where time measurement objects hold a very, very unique place. As we move into the recent decades, over to the last century, mechanical timekeeping was vastly improved upon over the last century. Mechanical watches, if just out of curiosity, who has a mechanical watch, automatic or manual, on their wrist, not battery operated? So there's a few of us out there. These are objects of permanence versus the digital objects and the quartz objects, which are objects of obsolescence. And this is a big difference in objects of time measurement. Why is it that something that's essentially obsolete is still important and we're still passionate about it? It's because it's the work of human beings. It's the work of men and women who hand finish and create these products and create these objects. And to tie it back to Theo, I'm convinced that as we're moving deeper and deeper to the digital age, keep in mind, we're in the infancy of the digital age still. Those of us on the stage are among the last, and some of you out there, are the last generation to have 1 foot in the pre-digital age and 1 foot in the digital age. This is a monumental shift in culture. This is bigger than the Industrial Revolution in many respects. So as we're moving deeper to the digital age, many of us in culture and societies are pursuing these analog realities. And I think that's something that touches us about Theo's work. It's so monumentally different from what we experience in the virtual space or on our computer screens. We want to touch it, we want to feel it, it emotes, we want to relate to it. This is a similar psychological connection to people who adore these mechanical objects, mechanical watches, really anything. And I think this is a really important touch point in terms of how Theo's work has been so impactful on people. It's this, here you are on your computer screen and you're looking at this footage, but you see something alive and you ask so many questions about the nature of what it is. That notion, that tactile aspect of the work is something that's so essential and so critical. And it's also something that watch collectors and people who are interested in these objects of science and technology and this intersection with art, this is what we gravitate towards too.
And earlier you mentioned that the one commonality is the self-starting, the self-movement of these two
Absolutely.
creatures.
So historically, any object of science and industry, before we had electricity, before we had battery, required some means of energy to provide power. So historically, that could be wind, air, which would be pneumatics, and it could be water, which would be hydraulics. And of course the sun as well, sun and shade. These were all sort of historical elements, and they were relevant to time measurement devices as well. Long before the mechanical clock, engineers would harness wind and harness water as a means of energy to provide for their objects and for their timekeeping objects. You always need a motive power. Everything needs a motive power. For us, it's, we have our own biological systems for doing so. For the Strandbeests, it is the wind. For the computer over there, it's the battery system that you're charging and plugging in. But everything that's driving, everything that's moving, everything that's living needs a means to provide that life force.
Great, thank you. Isabelle, so you have an installation here as part of Theo's exhibit. And your practice is based on refuge, the leftovers, the failures, and their function in the process of scientific research, which is a huge piece of it, actually. Tell us about your installation that has been commissioned for this exhibit and the process of experimenting with mechanical ideas of making, constructing, and tinkering. How does this resonate in the connection?
So yeah, when I was first commissioned and asked to participate in this exhibition, then I looked back at how I had first encountered the Strandbeests and through videos. And what struck me, what I remember most, is really the fact that a mechanical device can seem so lifelike. The connection between the fact that it's man-made and there is so much precision in it, yet what we find appealing in it is the fact that there's something that's not quite perfect, that is a little bit off, and that is what we find attractive, and that's where we recognize life. Life is the difference between maybe the mechanical part that is precise and what is unexpected. And together with unexpected, you would put together such notions as imperfection and the in-between, the thing you can't quite plan ahead for. And this I find fascinating in general. And as a person with a background in biology, having spent time in the lab and having labored over scientific experiments for a while, the other thing that I found a connection with through to the Strandbeests was really the fact that they were alive, and as a biologist I felt the urge to start studying them as actual animals. So the evolution, yes, I studied evolution, and I came to Dawkins. Of course the blind watchmaker is a huge part of my education, but being French, I have more other resources such as Jacques Monod and Albert Jacquard, and the word that we use is not tinkering, it's bricolage, which comes down to the same thing. It took me a long time to realize that those were the same words. And so yes, my education was very much about evolution and understanding both. I was interested in the problems of evolution and developmental biology. Developmental biology is how you get an organized system starting from something which is nothing but a ball which looks uniform. And then the ball divides into 2 cells, 4 cells, multiple cells, and those cells, still within something that looks like a ball, start moving everywhere until you recognize a body plan and structures that emerge out. And what is the program behind this? And evolution and development, at the time I was studying it in the 80s and 90s, those two fields were so close together, we called it Evo-Devo, you might have heard the term. And so what is appealing in this field is how it seems easy to put rules, and Theo, you were talking very much about when you were making your computer program, you had to put a set of rules.
Yeah.
So let's imagine what are the rules, and you want to simplify the system in order to study it. That's what we do as scientists. You cannot comprehend the whole complexity of the world, you have to simplify it first. So all these little bits I found very appealing in making the connections. Also, in terms of machines and making the mechanics, I have to admit that I stop at how they fail. So none of the machines that you will see downstairs achieve very much. Some of them you might have seen achieve absolutely nothing. I stop at the fascination for failure and how we approach failure as human beings, and how we have these high hopes for machines and for making these things that maybe will solve all our problems, and in the end, they maybe only solve a little bit. But if you have worked on solving that problem, the more time you have spent working on them, the more elated you are with a very small step in between. And I find that very exciting. And those people who have not manipulated and tried and made do not understand this feeling. But you have to have felt a crush at not making something work to understand the importance of it when even a small portion of it works. And this is the intersection at which I work. I enjoy very much making people imagine that they can make something from very small parts and very small systems and a small number of rules. So the display that I have put, called Backyard Lab, in that small space there, is really meant to inspire people to think that they can themselves go and do it, for one thing, but also question our humanity in terms of, the tickling machine goes back to, I start with a science paper which claims that you can't tickle yourself, so this is a problem, let's solve the problem. And the more preposterous the problem is, the less risky it is, so the more you can invent and create, and the more time you spend on it, the more nonsensical the response might be, and the more interesting it might be in order to lead to something or nothing eventually, but it's still interesting and it opens our curiosity, I think.
The journey, yeah.
The journey is what is interesting, yes.
Great, thank you very much. So before you created Strandbeests, you were involved in many projects that brought together, art and technology. One of them included a conceptual UFO. For those of you who've been downstairs, you've seen that, read a little bit about it. This 4-meter wide flying saucer that launched over the Delta in 1980, made from PVC, these pipes, yeah? So it was never found, but was believed to have landed somewhere in Belgium. Do you have any plans for a new generation that might include flying
Of UFOs.
animals? Birds?
The animals to fly. Well, I would love to make flying animals, especially if I can sit myself in there and just fly
Yes.
over the country. But being already 70 and knowing that the future will be not more than 30 years, then I realize I'm in a hurry to make these animals survive. So I cannot permit myself to make nice animals. I must make surviving animals in the purpose that these animals will survive on their own. So, of course, as an excursion for fun, I would like to make flying animals, but I don't see flying animals survive since they don't have eyes, and I don't see if well, you should give me a few more million years to make them see where they're going to fly with just the restriction of the tubes. So there might be a way, but I probably will. I must be realistic. I'm a dreamer, but I must be realistic as well, that if I want to make surviving animals, I really have to concentrate on the storms and the sand and the water, how they can survive that. And if they would survive better flying, of course I would do that.
Mm-hmm. Right, but you're interested in life today for them and their sustainability and survival. Right?
Yes.
So if I were to ask you this next question about life on Venus for your Strandbeests, you would probably say to me, we want them to live here.
Okay.
Right?
Yes, that would be okay. Yes, well, you're referring that the fact that I was had the honor to be invited by NASA,
yeah.
in the United States to join their brainstorm sessions to go to Venus, because they have a project still in a drawer, I think, but to go to Venus. And Venus is a very non-hostile planet, because the temperature is more than 450 degrees Celsius. The pressure is enormous. And so electronics wouldn't work there. Electronics would fail immediately. And since I have a sort of mechanical computer, they were interested to bring a sort of mechanical computer to Venus. And while I was explaining about my mechanical computer, of course, I promoted my caterpillar immediately, because a caterpillar you can roll up and it would fit in a space capsule. So that would be ideal to bring a moving, walking object to Venus. And they said, yes, interesting. So there is a chance that the caterpillar will land in Venus in the far future.
Do you know what the wind
The wind blows
wind
to,
is
to
like
Venus,
in
you mean?
Yeah.
No, I think they had the planning in the 20s somewhere.
Right.
And so it's gonna happen soon, evolutionary wise, but it might take a long time, since I think Donald Trump doesn't like Venus. He likes the moon again. So he canceled, I think, all the faraway planets, and he wants to explore the moon more. Yeah, depending on the president. So maybe he should vote another president.
All very temporary there. Yes. Yeah. So over the past couple decades, Strandbeests have evolved and weathered the rapidly changing climate. And I work here in Singapore at an observatory that studies geohazard, including climate change. The seaside environment, the air, the water that your Strandbeests enjoy in their walks is changing, right? Mm-hmm. Do you see raising awareness of this rising sea level and the age of pursuing some sustainability for the planet as a priority, and how could it become relevant as a way of helping?
Well, of course, if you look at the climate problem, I would say, it's a huge problem. I mean, we keep on doing the things we do, and it's so hard to give up. I mean, we're so addicted to cars and planes, and I don't see a solution so easy. I mean, otherwise that we must find something which could transform wind energy in a much cheaper way than we do now with these wind turbines, because you must plan so many wind turbines to fulfill our hunger for electricity. And also if we can get electric cars, but how to feed them? We must be very eager to find a better way to transform wind energy. And I'm thinking about it a lot. But, well, we must really be in a hurry to do this. And, but I told before that I'm an irrational optimist. It will come in the next few decades, so we can't stop this. Yeah. The only thing is, well, we have to think and experiment hard to do this.
Yeah, good. I appreciate your optimism. Would either of you like to chime in on this topic in relation to your work and how it might play a role?
I think there's such increasing global consciousness about these broader issues, increasing quest for solutions, and for the first time we have real leaders in technology, some in politics, who are taking this very, very seriously. Like Theo, I'm also an unapologetic optimist, and maybe that comes with our interest in such matters of deep time. We hope for the preservation of our species. We think about it a lot. But I see some lights ahead. I mean, look, we have the sun. We have, the source is there. Now it's just a matter of harnessing it. This is agreed upon. The sun provides enough energy to power our entire planet. It's a matter of just harnessing that energy and translating that energy. And there's great minds working on it. And I'm optimistic for this, as long as we keep pressuring the politicians, and most importantly, keep pressuring the corporations to make better decisions and to think in a much, much longer lead. I think the timeline is extending for many, many people, many, many companies. Part of the danger of everything becoming publicly traded is the timeline gets short with publicly traded entities, right? It's about the quarter, it's not even about the year, it's about the next 4 months. This is where private companies, private institutions like we are, we're a family-run business, independent companies, artists, museums, we're the ones who have that power to extend the timeline, to push culture to look further beyond the quarter, beyond the year, beyond the decade, but into the century. This is my little seed of optimism that I want to plant around the world.
Okay. What about adaptability to not being optimistic, but being realistic, adapting to the realities of areas, again, where your beasts are walking now that won't be here in 30 years, where we're sitting now, around these areas, and how we adjust to that. And, in sustainability, you have the Strandbeests. What about sustainability for us as well? Yeah. And I would even challenge the failure idea around finding the successes and finding some of the keys.
Yeah, actually what I'm thinking is the power at the personal level. Of course, we all have to be optimistic ourselves and to believe that what we do, our action daily, can have an impact. That's as one thing, but also be adaptable and be very anchored in our environment, much more than a lot of us tend to be because of the environment in which we grow. The society, especially in the city, which forces us down easy lines of using things that is easily provided, as opposed to being self-reliant. And we shouldn't neglect to teach our children to be self-reliant and to feel that they have the power to feed themselves, they have the power to move around in a different way than what the city provides to them every day. And then when the environment becomes difficult because there is no going away from there, the environment will become harder to live in, that they feel that they can survive in that environment with their own resource. And we can never be more creative than when we are faced straight with the difficulties. That's when all the power, all the creativity comes up. We can plan on being creative. We can do workshops on trying to get people to be creative, but until you're drowning, you will not realize that your legs can actually prop you up. So, yeah, get in the water more often, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. So, in relation to your generations of Strandbeests and their different iterations and lives and types, and I know you said that your most favorite is the one you're working on today, the caterpillars. Is there a fan favorite? I mean, do you hear from your followers and your people that which ones really speak to them? And
Well, I noticed that, when you walked in the museum, that I explained, for instance, that the fossil animals, that they were once alive, and people say, yes, yes. And then we go to the humerus, and we pump it up with a compressor, and the animal starts walking, then I think that's the favorite beast, the beast which moves.
the one that's moving at the time, right?
Yes.
Right.
And so I think that the audience likes that most.
Right. Isabelle and Michael, do you have favorites that speak to you?
I like them as a group, of course, because as a biologist, I embrace the differences, and that's what I find fascinating about them, is the variety. I think having just one wouldn't be as exciting. And when I heard you saying yesterday that in terms of evolution, they went from more complex to more simple, I was also very excited as an evolutionarist. I like how it makes people think differently about evolution. And I really like how trying to model something, just making things, can make people understand science better, the way we see the world differently. So yeah, as a group, I like them as a group. They really need to be all together. We need the variety, because none of us in the same way would be there without the variety that's around. And in biology also, many people specialize in one animal. Oh, you will have the fly biologist, the xenopus, the frog biologist. But really the ones that are exciting are the ones who study these strange animals that are in between, that actually don't follow any of those models and do things slightly differently. And that explains so much better how the whole system works. So we need a group. Yeah, we need them all.
You even talked about, almost seeing them with their heartbeats and blood and guts right there within them. Yeah.
Yes, they are really alive, and I like also the one that you have, which has this function that doesn't do anything. It doesn't. You discovered the movement. I can't remember the name of that beast, which has the front that goes up and down. You discovered the movement, but you thought they had no function for it.
The mating ritual.
Yeah.
The mating ritual, yes. And I think it's very interesting from an evolutionary point of view also. We have to be aware we are full of spare parts that actually don't have any function. Our human brain is made to think that everything we have has a function. So why do we have fingers? Oh, we have fingers so we can comprehend things. But that's not really how it works. Our brain makes us want to give a function to things. But for evolution to happen, you need to have new things that happen all the time, or bits left over from previous times. They're just hanging there, doing nothing, until another spare part comes in, which finally will make the whole system work. So we are full of spare parts. We are absolutely not complete. We are work in progress all the time. So these little parts of your beast that don't actually do anything efficient in terms of moving on the ground are actually very important. And one day, evolution will find a role for them when new bits come in.
Well, they kind of do in a way. It's like, to me, those non-functional aspects are like the puppy effect. It's the anthropomorphic effect. It's what creates that emotional link and that emotional connection. That's when they really come alive. So yeah, to your point, it's already happening. It's already part of the experience for some of us. My favorite reality of the Strandbeests is watching people react to it. And this is unique in the space of art, to see works. Well, and like you, I mean, they're alive for me. They've been alive for many years. I view them this way. But to see people from the age 6 to age 90 experience the Strandbeests with that same sense of awe. And awe is an interesting word because it's also the sound we make when we experience it. No matter what language you speak, when your bottom jaw, awe. I mean, awe this is Ernst Cassirer, by the way, who made that link. But this is a phenomenal experience to witness. And we're sponsors of Art Basel. We're at art fairs. We work with a lot of very interesting artists in many different respects. But that approach of inclusiveness, of adventure, of experience from a community all at one time, the optimism, the wonder. This is unique in these creations and with the creator. This is something that's very, very special about this work. This is why it matters to me, because it's unapologetic in terms of the desire to have that reaction from people, to make people smile, as you say. This is beautiful. This is not said enough. This is not experienced enough, especially in the art world where we're often being pushed to look at something on the dark side, pushed to be looking something on the negative side. That's important too. Art should ground people, but art should also elevate our consciousness and elevate our experience. And that's the phenomenal reaction that most of us, if not all of us, have when encountering these Strandbeests, because it's encountering an animal. If it was a live elephant in the room, it would be the same reaction. It would be the exact same reaction. That's incredible to me. I mean, in the years we've met, I'm yet to experience anything close to that in the realm of art. That's special. We look for art that cuts through the timeline, right? All art is contemporary art in the era it was made, but very few artists are relevant generations and generations later. That's the difference between classical and contemporary art. When we look at a museum like the Metropolitan Museum of Art or British Museum, society has already made those decisions as to what constitutes art. We're in the process of making that decisions now. Most artists hope that their work is going to cut through the timeline and matter. Theo's work, inherently, it's designed to cut through the timeline.
Wow.
But that's the point. The point is for them to survive. That's the emphasis, is that they like this watch on my wrist, which is going to outlive me by hundreds of years. That's the hope of Strandbeests, that it's going to outlive all of us, that they're going to be out there living their lives.
Great. Do you have something to add?
Yeah, and I look forward to seeing the evolution. You're right, they will continue evolving. And actually, from that point of view, I had a question. Have you seen Strandbeest? I'm sure fans would send you some images or videos of Strandbeests that they have made according to your model, which might be different, but take some of the spirit of what you do.
Oh yes, sure. So there are many students. They put the videos on YouTube, but they have a personal contact, for instance, with a guy in Amsterdam who made a mutant 3D printed animal. So you can 3D print Strandbeests nowadays, and with a special printer, by the way. But it is born in the 3D printer. So it's not assembled, it comes in one piece out of the printer. And that's a special printer. It's not the one you all have at home. No, it's a special printer. But it prints the beast, and you put it on the table and it runs away. And it
sounds dangerous.
And the thing is that...
You can go back and press the button to make more?
Yes. So what's happening is now that there are... I'm talking about DNA codes, where you have DNA codes of zeros and ones which belong to a 3D printed beast. So In fact, the 3D printer materializes a DNA code. And what's happening now is the DNA codes, they roam over the internet, and these animals are printed out in all corners of the world. And this mutant by this guy in Amsterdam, I must say, it walks quite well. It has another DNA code than my animals, so it does have other 30 numbers. So it might have more descendants than my animals. And that means that there's a real evolution going on the internet right now, which is totally out of control. This is all happening behind my back. And and that's what I call life. So the meme theory of Richard Dawkins is materialized by 3D printers. And this brings up a lot of new thoughts, for instance, that, evolution lasted for 4.5 billion years, and this is a new branch. So we live in a very special epoch of time that there's a new branch coming on the tree of evolution at the moment. Another thing is that it makes me think, what is a 3D printer? A 3D printer is in fact the same as a pregnant woman. It materializes a DNA code. A code of zeros and ones in the 3D printer is materialized in the beast, the same as we do. So this also changes my perspective, how you look at things.
Yeah.
Silence.
I'm sure.
And on the other end of the spectrum, you have the guy who made the Strandbeests with his hamster in the
Yeah.
hamster ball on top. So
Oh, that's a good one.
somebody has piloted a Strandbeest. Unfortunately, it wasn't Theo; it's a hamster. But it's quite interesting to see.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Right, very good. So I'd love to play a little clip for you all, and then we can talk about it and ask you how this came to be. So can we run that clip?
Oh, yes.
Volume.
Well, if we don't get the volume, you get the gist of it. This is a strand beast that people are afraid of. It's attacking the community. Oh my God. How do we stop it? Strandbeests out of control. So this took place in 2016. Has anybody seen this episode?
You want to create a
Few of
stunning
us?
website.
Finally, we have sound.
I certainly have. There are just a handful of us who have seen this episode. But can you speak a little bit? Maybe we'll get it back again, but if not, can you speak a little bit about how that came to be and what it was like hanging out with the Simpsons and
Well, I must say it was, of course I knew the Simpsons because I have children, you know, they look at the Simpsons and and I got this email from would you like to be in the Simpsons? I said, well, and do you want to go to a studio somewhere around, a sound studio around your living, where you live? And so that I went to Amsterdam, and I spent, I think, half an hour in that studio.
half an hour? Okay.
Yeah, because there's also a song in there. I sing a Christmas song, and it was done so fast, and I didn't have any idea that this was, as soon as it was on television, I got emails. So many. My family in the United States said, "Oh, you're in The Simpsons," and
Right.
so I was quite surprised.
So
that it
for
had
this much effort,
yes, and
Explosion.
a huge impact. Yes.
Right, right.
And they paid me money for that.
well, good, yeah.
Crazy, isn't it?
As they should. As they
Yes.
should.
This is crazy.
Yeah.
But, well, these things happen, and somehow this influences the attention for my work, so obviously, because, well, a bit of a human being has been in The Simpsons, you see.
That's right. That's right. Very nice. So, well, I think now I would love to open it up to questions from this wonderful audience. So I think someone's running around with a mic, and we will take some questions, okay?
It goes to the Simpsons, actually. Your beasts are portrayed as something dangerous, right? And the beasts that you have created in real life, you've kept them to a size that are manageable by yourself, right? So when these beasts are evolve and grow by themselves or by people that are making more, it's going to come a time for people to be afraid of. Have you thought about this side of the evolution? How do you deal with the thoughts of my beast at some point might give fear instead of curiosity or the sense of awe?
So you mean that people are dominated by strand beasts?
Not dominated, but will be afraid of them.
Or be afraid of them?
Yeah.
Because there are too many, I guess. Or too big, yeah. Well, you don't have to worry about that. But it's, well, of course, people think that robots will dominate, or, and I think it's happening already, not too much with robots, but cars, in fact. We are dominated by cars. We're so much addicted to cars that we cannot do without them anymore. So, in fact, we are, cars rule the world. We are not ruling the world, cars are ruling the world. So you could see a car as a new specimen, a new meme which has become a certain shape, which is the best surviving car. The cars use us just like the Strandbeests use us to reproduce. And so we should be not afraid for Strandbeests, because we can still control them, and people are not, well, I'm addicted to them, but not, I think I'm the only one, but it's not too many people are really addicted to them, like we are addicted to cars. So we should be afraid of the specimen called car.
Hello. I'm curious about your creative process. If you could talk about how do you develop a beast? Do you start with a vision of a beast, or maybe start with like a new development of a mechanism, or if the two go hand in hand, is the form following, the principle of evolution, or if anything else you'd like to share about your creative process?
Yes, well, usually it starts always a sort of dream, you could say, and I try to realize that dream by just making drawings, and as soon as the drawing looks more or less like it should look, then I'll make a drawing in 3 dimensions, you could say. So I can use this tube as a line. So, and you can build structures very fast with this kind of tube, because to connect them, you just drill a hole in it, put a zip tie through it, and another hole, and you just connect it. So you can build a construction just in a few hours. And then you could look at this construction as a 3-dimensional drawing, which just, instead of the pencil, you have these tubes. And usually this drawing gives me new ideas to change the drawing the next day. And so then comes, for instance, such an idea as the caterpillar was already there for years. But I thought that the material was too weak to keep that shape of a wave. So then there was this moment that I was on holidays in Belgium with friends, and in the morning I woke up and I thought, well, maybe I should try another principle with the worms, the caterpillars. And then when I came home, I built a system, and you would expect that it would work immediately, but it took like they walked last week, they never walked in those 3 years. So it took 3 years before they really did what they were supposed to do. And so it goes in very small steps. And so I think it's a real evolutionary process and not intelligent design. So people sometimes say, well, what you do is intelligent design. I don't think it is. It's just I'm following the tubes.
Can I ask a question about the caterpillars? We will still get to your questions, but I noticed some of them were different lengths, and in their walking, depending on their length, they had 2 humps, or 1 hump, or 3 humps.
Yes.
How do the humps play a role in that?
Yes, they need at least 2 hops, so it's 2 wavelengths, you could say, to be stable. And but you can add another one on the back, so you can have a dozen hops if you like, and it still would work. It's a little bit heavier to pull it with the wind, but at least 2 waves.
Do those sections act as individual beasts huddled together in the same way that the predecessors do, those individual segments?
Yes, well, they're connected, though, so they should follow each other, and otherwise they cannot do it. Yeah.
But you can keep at, hypothetically, you could have 4 or 5
Yeah,
humps.
yeah.
Keep on going.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so happy. It's a very simple one, ladies and gentlemen.
That means it's not going to be.
A very simple one. How big is your zoo of animals? How big is the zoo? Obviously, over the years, you've built many strand beasts. I'm just trying to imagine how many you've built. Where do you keep them?
Where do I keep the animals?
Yeah. And then what do you do with the dead ones? Is there a big cemetery for the dead ones too?
Yes.
Okay, besides that, have you thought of using organic materials to make your strand beast? And also because you have incorporated wind movement and so on, have you also tried to incorporate music into your beasts? Since there's, air movement and so on. Mm-hmm. So I don't know whether you've actually tried to do that too. And that would be I think it would be very magical if you could see the beast moving and the music being played at the same time.
Thank you for your question. It was a long question, by the way. So 3 questions, in fact. So let's start with the cemetery. Indeed, and every spring I bring a new animal to the beach, and during the summer I experiment, and in the fall I bring it to the boneyards. And since a few years, these boneyards are adopted in exhibitions like this. So all the animals which you find here in the exhibition, they are extinct. And sometimes we can reanimate an extinct animal, just like in Jurassic Park. And so we pump it up with a compressor, and then the animal comes alive again. The second question was... the biological material. Yet there are some strand beasts from bamboo. And bamboo is a very strong material, and I think bamboo could be a very good material for strand beasts, but not on the beach of Holland, because everything on the beach in Holland, it rottens. So my car is rusted, and I think bamboo wouldn't last very much time on that beach. PVC turns out to be even pieces which are 20 years old now, they bleach in the sun, so they become very bony and so white, but it's still quite strong. So to survive, I need some material which keeps on going. Of course, PVC is not a very nice material for the environment, so I must I must tell you that it's 100% recyclable. I must be careful with the tubes. So all the small pieces which I don't use anymore, they go back to the factory and they make new tubes of that. So I think we cannot live without plastic anymore, but we should have policies to be more careful with it. Then we have the music question. Of course, I'm a musician myself. I love music, and I would love to spend the animals to make music. But just like I said to Sabrina, is that these animals, they should survive, and music is maybe they could seduce humanity more if they make music. But in fact, they are making music already. If you listen to the sound of a strandbeest, it's really beautiful sound. It's like music. They do it from themselves. I don't have to add anything to that.
Hi again. So I've actually got a question for you and the rest of the panel as well. So I'm actually studying engineering, and I've done art in the past. And I was wondering, because you mentioned that the boundaries between art and engineering are only inside our imagination and in our heads. So like, how did you end up moving from being a physicist, studying physics, to going to becoming a landscape painter, and then creating these creations which are connected towards like engineering and art at the same time? And then the question for the rest of the panel is also like, a lot of you study areas of science. So even like time, the study of biology and everything are very science related. And yet you have that appreciation for art. So what kind of advice do you have towards people who are stepping in this like blur between the two boundaries? Like what kind of advice do you have in the creation of artworks that inspire both artists, scientists, engineers, designers, and people in those areas?
So the first question, how I became an artist by studying physics. So it's, well, it was a very specific area of time. It was the hippie time in those days. So everybody did something which you were not supposed to do. So I was not a student which was very often on school. And I was painting. And so after 7 years trying to do my exams, and sometimes I succeeded, sometimes I failed. So I was not a very good student, I must say. And so after 7 years, I just said, well, from now on, I call myself an artist. And I became a painter. And that's did for many years. And then in the beginning, the UFO came by. And so everything was not a plan, I must say, it just came to me. So it's not a day that you think, I want to be an artist. No, it was just happening to me. But you had another question.
No, it was a very good question. And the fact that you're asking the question, you're already on the path for the solution. Many people live their whole lives without asking these types of questions, how to balance your profession with your passions. And number one, be passionate about what your profession is. And if that's the case, it's going to lead into fascinating directions. And as little time as you feel you have, always take that necessary time for your creative mind. That's only going to make your professional work better, your relationships better, everything in your life better. And don't care if you're good at something or not good at something, especially in pertains to art. Those notions shouldn't even come into your mind whatsoever. So while you're pursuing your engineering degree, follow rabbit holes. Don't be frightened of falling into rabbit holes. As long as you're keeping up with your studies and your work, take that necessary time to explore and find what those other artistic channels are. And as Theo said, they're going to intersect anyway. Even though you don't paint anymore, it's still in your spirit, it's still in your mind. It's still there, even if you're not actively doing it or pursuing it. In our minds, both Theo and I would like to be professional musicians on some level. We're okay, but we're not good enough to do that. But it doesn't mean we don't play our instruments and don't sing with our friends. That's still an important part of our lives, even though it's not how we make our living, so to speak. So I would say try to find that niche in engineering that you're genuinely passionate about. So it doesn't feel like work, it feels like play. That's this number one. If you can achieve that, your life is in a great direction. And then that type of mental freedom allows you to pursue more purely creative enterprises as well.
Okay, I guess it's my turn. But the only advice I usually give is don't listen to my advice. Because we remember things differently from how they happened. So I could tell you the story of how I was a biologist and how I became an artist, but over time, as I tell the story, I know I'm making it one line, but it's really going that way. And what really happens is you're a different person today than you were yesterday. Every day is different. And, you know, I did one day say, and I like to say the date, that's the one thing I will tell you, on the 1st of January 2000, my contract had ended the day before in a science lab, and I said from the 1st of January 2000, I will call myself an artist. So it's just a symbolic, it took another very long time before I could speak meaningfully about what I was saying, but every day in the meantime, I was still saying, you know, I'm an artist, and through saying it, it just became something. I can't say I'm complete in any way, and I've completed what I'm doing, so every day is a new finding and looking at things, but also the integrating the art into the science into the art that I do is something that it's like it came back eventually to catch up with me. As a student or when you grow up, you learn a certain way of looking at things, and I think this is what I learned at university, is a way of looking at the world. This is what you learn in science, not the facts and you know what the diameter of the Earth is, or whether it's the sun that goes around the Earth. I defy anybody to say how you would find out which way it is. So it's not that, it's how you ask the questions, and that stays with you for a long time and forever. And eventually, when you're getting deep into whatever it is that you are doing, and you don't need to give a name to it most of the time, then that stays with you, and that's how you make your work. So then eventually you get called an artist or a scientist. Usually it comes from what your background is in, rather than what it is that you make now and what kind of box it gets put in, because eventually it gets shown to the world, and people do need reference to give it a name, but you don't have to name what you do. And keep an open mind. I keep an open mind, and I look at new things, and I discover new things every day, and that is how I get new ideas to make new things. I don't need to call it one or the other, really, on most days. Yeah.
Hi. Hi, I just had a question for everyone on the panelists, and it's just about what do you think art can bring to science? Because I think a lot of the time the discourse is always the other way, and I'm always wondering how you can communicate to people the value of art without them having to enter from somewhere outside and feel that they can conquer the field because it's meaningless and about starving. Yeah. Thank you.
I think art brings a tremendous amount to science, which is why CERN, for example, has a curator, Monica Bello, and as an artist residency program for that very purpose. Art gives the ability for all of us to challenge those conventions and those systems of learning and our preconceived ideas, and to push us in new directions. I think that they're so closely linked. I mean, it's only been in the last couple hundred years that they've been separated, we have to keep in mind. And Theo is often referred to with the Da Vinci reference, which is perfect, because when you look back at the Renaissance, there was absolutely no distinguishing between these different pursuits. The greatest scientific minds were also artists, and the greatest artistic minds were also scientists. This wasn't occasional, this was absolute. If you were not pursuing those multiple different directions you really weren't living that Renaissance life. That's what we mean by a Renaissance woman or a Renaissance man. That's somebody who takes all those pursuits on. I think as we move deeper and deeper to the digital age, the role that art has in science and technology is becoming increasingly more and more important. For us to ask those bigger questions, ask those philosophical questions, and to challenge ourselves. I think it has an absolutely massive role, and I think anyone who says otherwise is really on the wrong side of history.
If we had another 2 hours, I could go on for a long time about this too. I think what art gives to science is a safe space to imagine, in the same way that in evolution you have these spare parts that are sitting there unused for a long time. Every time you create something new, it doesn't have to have a function. Just do things because it's fun. Humor, nonsensical. This is much more important than we think. And everyday life usually catches up with us, and we have to, make the grant. If you're in the lab, you have to make sure you produce something that can be put down and has a result. But this wouldn't happen if there wasn't also a time to imagine things that are impossible, things that are useless. And it's through talking and discussion, and art is very much there. It's not palpable very often. It's just ideas. You go and see something and you get new ideas for it. You go to a museum, you go and talk with an artist, and it doesn't need to make sense. It doesn't need to. And so the scientists themselves can find a safe space in expressing things that maybe don't have a function. That's, I think, an important role for art. Yeah.
So, yeah, well, my idea about the separation between the arts and the scientists came as soon as there came the institutes, like universities, museums, which separated the arts from the science. And, of course, when you are an engineer and you want to build a bridge, you cannot play too much, because the bridge must really support all those cars which go over there. So the difference is that an artist is able to play. It has a short feedback, like I just told you. You can build something in an hour and then say, oh, next time I'm going to do this. But building houses and buildings, it's not easy to do that. But I think at this moment of time, we are living in a very special period, because you can simulate in computers. So you could simulate a bridge, and you could make a crazy bridge which would collapse. You can build a bridge in an hour. So I'm quite optimistic about engineers who can become artists again, because they can play a little bit more in those computers. So I think we're going into a new stage that we're going to marry again, together.
Totally, and I think architecture is touching upon this in the last 20 years. We're at Audemars Piguet, our new museum and hotel are being built by Bjarke Ingels from Big Group, and I view Bjarke as an artist and a philosopher as much as I do as an architect. To Theo's point, because we can now model through CAD, we can model through different computer software program. It allows engineers and architects to really think outside of the box. Even we at Audemars Piguet, even though we're still hand finishing and handcrafting these mechanisms, they're still conceptualized on a computer. The prototyping is often done on the computer for the more advanced mechanisms, and it really liberates the technicians to become artists. So the technology often has that function of liberating. A good example is the invention of photography. Before the invention of photography, art was primarily representative. It wasn't always represented the same way. There had some cultural and historical shifts, but it was primarily representative. Photography comes along, and now I'm able to capture an image perfectly. So realism now starts to dissipate, and what happens in the wake of the invention of photography, this is exactly what leads to Impressionism. You don't have one without the other. Technology leads to artistic revolution over and over and over again. This has been happening throughout the history. And that's where, where history of science and technology intersecting with art, this is where I spend my time thinking and writing, because the two are so closely linked. And I think right now, to Theo's point, that's what computer modeling is allowing. And look at where we are in Singapore. Yeah. I mean, these buildings and these structures are, for somebody not from this city, it's so artistic and beautiful. It's so different from other places around the planet. Dubai is another place where the rules are just completely broken in that respect. So I think it's, like you, it's a very exciting time, unlike any other in history in that respect.
Can I just add a little bit about low-tech as well? And the importance, for example, we're talking about the connection between art and science, and at the basis of both, there is observation and curiosity, and the will to discover the world around us. And in biology, it's very obvious. I saw the shift from hand drawings, looking down the microscope, and hand drawing with this really cute tool called the camera lucida, where you can attach a piece to the microscope and you just see at the same time your hand and the cells under the microscope, and you would draw over them. Something happens when you use your own hand to do the drawing. And when you're doing a drawing, you are actually using a part of your brain which tells you, oh, the cell is round, so you draw a circle. And then suddenly you look and you say, wait, if I'm drawing a circle, this other circle won't fit. So you suddenly see mistakes in what you were seeing. Doing things actually tells you what your brain is not comprehending properly. So even going down to low-tech and doing a drawing of what you think you see helps you observe things better. So, and I've seen the jump from these camera lucida to using a computer, to using a camera. At first film was still a bit expensive, so you choose and then you take a few pictures, to digital camera where you just spend the afternoon shooting every single cell that you can put under the microscope, and then making an analysis of what you see would become sifting through the thousands of shots that you have done, as opposed to just having the time to do one drawing and actually realizing that what you thought you saw wasn't actually what was actually there, and having to solve through physically doing the drawing. So scientists do need artistic skills from that point of view, if you can say drawing is an artistic skill. So that's another point entry.
I think we have time for one more question. There was one over here a few minutes ago. Yeah? Okay, great.
Just to pivot back to the Strandbeests, I'm wondering how you conceptualize them, because there's an element of them being very realistic in terms of it being like a caterpillar, but at the same time looking at it, there's a sense that they are otherworldly. So I'm wondering how, as the person who made them, how you're conceptualizing them.
So do you mean how I use examples in real nature to do my work, or I didn't understand really the question?
Like, do you think of them as something that mimics the real world, or do you think of them as like an entirely different otherworldly creatures that are completely like
Its own evolutionary path.
You yeah?
A little bit, yeah. I think she's asking, like, to what extent are they mimicking existing animals?
Yes.
And to what extent are they otherworldly?
Yeah. Okay.
Creation
Yes.
of an
Sorry, I didn't. I'm a little bit deaf, you see, and I don't understand everything. So the thing is that indeed, if you, for instance, the caterpillar, well, it really moves like a caterpillar, right? But the real caterpillars, they use a totally different system to realize this movement, because they have muscles which make a peristaltic movement. So one muscle activates the next one, and that's why you get this wave in a caterpillar. And this caterpillar has a totally new way of moving, wave. So with this 4 ropes as I was talking about, and so it has a mechanical way of moving, which is basically different from a real caterpillar. So I don't want to copy reality by making a caterpillar, but I just use the way of moving and with a new system. Also the lag system, so the classical lag system of the Strandbeest, well, we know all legs, how they move, and that happens all with muscles. But this has a mechanical way of moving that it doesn't need too much energy to move smoothly, and that's a new system. So it's, I really like to make new animals. I want to forget everything what I know about the existing world. So I don't want to make dinosaurs or people, beasts who do like dinosaurs. They really must have their own identity and their own way of evolving and their own functionality.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this afternoon. This was a fascinating afternoon. I really appreciate all of your time today and your wonderful questions and insight in mechanics and art and success and failure. We will wrap up this wonderful afternoon, and Strandbeests is around till the end of September, so please come back, bring your friends, and share this experience with them. And something to add? Yes?
Thank you so much to our guest speakers for a truly wonderful and compelling conversations. Sabrina, Isabelle, Michael, and Theo.
Thank you.
And it's been such a pleasure having all of you as our audience. So please come back. There's a full spectrum of program that sits alongside the exhibition that runs until 30th September, as what Sabrina said. Please enjoy the rest of your day, and we hope to see you back at the museum again. Thank you.
Thank you.